This is Floyd Abrams, and this is Speaking Freely, a podcast brought to you in the auspices of Law and Crime, about law, law and politics, law and government, but most of all, about free speech, and about some of the harder issues with respect to free speech in America. I'm so very glad that Andrew Sorkin is with us today. Andrew, of course, is the financial columnist of the New York Times, the co-anchor of CNBC's Squawk Box, founder and editor of Daily Book, a person who has carved out a dominant position for himself in what he does. In fact, it was so dominant that when I was checking him out, just to make sure I wasn't leaving off any particular aspects of his life, I saw that he'd written some wonderful movies until I realized that whoever created whatever I was reading included a few of Aaron Sorkin's scripts together with all the things that Andrew's done. So welcome, Andrew. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, and I'm happy to be confused with Aaron any day.
I wanted to start by asking you a sort of a large question and then some elements of it about Elon Musk's position. That is to say, what it is he is saying, what it is he's telling us that he's going to do with Twitter if he gets it. And what I have in mind in particular is it's just not clear to me whether he's saying that he's going to sort of abandon the notion of content modification completely or not. I mean, is he saying, I'll have on anything that's lawful? Or is he saying, I'm just going to make some different decisions than the one that the current proprietors have made in this area? What's your understanding of just what he's saying he's going to do in this very important area?
So I think the answer is nobody knows, but it's closer to the latter in terms of continuing some kind of moderation, content moderation, but perhaps with a different or more laissez-faire view towards some of this content. To the extent that he's hinted at his strategy, one of the things he said just last week was that he was inclined not to ban people from Twitter in their entirety permanently in the way that, for example, former President Trump was, but that he would be using, quote, timeouts. So maybe if somebody said something that included misinformation or something of the sort, that maybe there would be a timeout for some period of time, but there wouldn't be permanent bans, for example. But he does have a very clear view that he believes that the algorithms and the individuals inside Twitter, and probably even broader than that to social media, are too aggressively moderating speech on these platforms and doing it, I think, in his view, to benefit a more liberal or progressive perspective as opposed to a conservative or Republican perspective. Right. He himself is a self-described libertarian, but is an enigma politically insofar as he has spent much of his career at Tesla evangelizing, trying to end climate change, and was long somebody who the progressive left loved for that. But then, of course, has also, during the pandemic specifically, when California came down hard on both masking and some of the other rules, he went the opposite way.
Yeah. Now, I understand that he takes a more libertarian, perhaps, view, but sometimes he has sounded to me as if at least he would like to sound as if he's going to offer, if he does achieve the ascendancy he's looking for, that what he'd like to do is to have significantly more openness to speech than he believes Twitter now has. And I mean, that's why, I think sort of out loud to myself, racist speech? I can't believe.
Well, to me, that's the question. What are we talking about? And once you say free speech, are we talking about racist speech? Are we talking about pornography? I have children that go on these platforms. Do you want them using foul language or addressing certain things? This is, how would he approach issues around health, for example? How would he approach issues around political information or misinformation? I think his view generally, without sort of painting a completely broad brush, is that he wants to open that up into a much sort of broader prism, if you will.
I agree with him when he says if it's in a gray area, leave it. Don't take it off. But at least sometimes he has sort of sounded to me, deliberately or not, as sort of leaving open the questions. If somebody says, look, that's Russian disinformation, or somebody says this is such false speech about who to vote for.
Well, and this is where I think it becomes so complicated, and I'd be very curious, what you, the great counselor, thinks of this. Put it in the context of vaccination, or any of the sort of health issues that we've been talking about for the last 2 years as a result of this pandemic. I think that his approach, if I understand it, would be, if you think that hydrochloroquine works, say hydrochloroquine works. And if you think masking doesn't work, tell people masking doesn't work. And if you think people shouldn't take the vaccine and you want to tell them that it doesn't work, you could tell them that. I think that's where he's going directionally, but I don't know. And then, to me, that becomes a very interesting question from a free speech, but also policy perspective, whether that is good for the country or not. And to me, it's not so much that people can say whatever they want, which I'm a believer everybody should be able to say whatever they want. It's whether that should be magnified by these platforms that can therefore take that message and make them reach tens of millions of people.
Yeah, I agree fully. That's sometimes, it's hard to express in a sentence or two what a policy is, what a change of policy is. That's not his fault. But it just, the reason I started with this is that, our program is called Speaking Freely, and yet no one that I know really believes everybody should speak falsely, publicly about matters of health concern. That doesn't mean anybody goes to jail for doing so, but it does mean that if I have a platform, let alone a platform like Twitter, that I'll be careful not to put on material which can have rather obviously and dangerously harmful impact on, say, the health of the public. And I think at least he's left himself open to the understanding that he would lean so far in the direction of saying, if someone's saying it, let him say it, and then going beyond that and saying, I'll carry it. That would be farther than I would go, for example.
I think you're right. And, one of the things he said last week in that interview at the TED conference was that he wasn't doing this for economic purposes, that he was doing this ostensibly, I don't know if he used the word for moral purposes, but to the degree that he has a sort of moral view of what free speech is about, and this idea of that Twitter should be more of a public town square than it should be a platform with either censors or content moderators, or I don't know what you describe them as.